Good morning. Okay, we're going to get started. My name is Terry Johnson. I'm the Director of Employment and Community-Based Services here at the Resource Center, and you were all asked to be here for a reason. You are all leaders and supervisors of the agency, and we're bringing to you a series of trainings. I am part of a program called SAFER, which stands for, and I'm going to kill you with acronyms here, and I apologize in advance, stands for Supporting and Facilitating Employee Retention. And it's part of a grant that we have through the City of Jamestown called ESPRI. And ESPRI stands for Empire State Poverty Reduction Initiative. And so there's a group of providers in the area that are ESPRI partners that are working on this grant project, and we all have different pieces of the puzzle. So the City of Jamestown was awarded this grant, and the United Way is the one that's managing the grant, and the Resource Center has part of the funds that are coming in. And it ties in a lot with what the Resource Center is doing with staff assistance. And so we are bringing a training to you guys coming up at the end of May 21st and 22nd, called Bridges Out of Poverty. And the SAFER team, which consists of Beth Germain, Chris Anderson, Cody Ann Chambers, and myself, have been to the Bridges Out of Poverty training, and it is phenomenal. So you will be getting the experience of that training at the end of May, but we wanted to set the stage, and that's what these 4 prerequisite trainings are about, is setting the stage for what you're going to learn that day. So we've been through the training, and really the training develops what we want to do now is develop the concepts that's going to be introduced at that training so that you understand your workforce. It's all about looking at it from the lens of your employees. So this is to help you supervise and manage your teams and your employees. So as we go through this, think of it that way, not about necessarily the people that you support, but your teams, the people you supervise and the people that you have on your team. So Bridges is all about understanding the people, meeting them where they're at, and where they come from and why they kind of do the things that they do. So those of us that have been supervisors for a long time know that it can be frustrating when, you know, I've told somebody 100 times to do it, or they called in for a reason that we may not feel is the best reason to call in for work. So think about, you know, as we go through these, we're going to learn a little bit deeper into why people make the choices that they make, whether we would necessarily agree with them or not. So as we move forward, the ideas that we're going to be talking about over the next 2 months are all related to building and developing your staff. So our workforce over the years has changed. We don't have people knocking down our door to work here every day. We don't have hundreds of people that come in already with the skill sets to be the perfect staff that we want. So we have to develop them and teach them the things that we need them to know. They're not coming in with all of the soft skills that we want them to have. So the program is really about meeting your employees where they're at, teaching them some of the skills, because if you terminate them, like after their first or second offense, there might not be somebody else to replace them. So we have to invest in our staff so that they have we can build them up, build their skill sets, because they're not necessarily coming to us with what we want them to have, so we have to give them some of those tools. So Bridges is all about meeting people where they're at. As part of the ESPRI project, we've partnered with many organizations and to create these next 4 sessions that you're going to be having before the Bridges training. So I'm thrilled that our friends from the Mental Health Association have joined us today. They're going to talk to you about mental illness, substance use disorder, and the workforce. And then we're going to show you a video at the end that Beth will kind of tie into what Steve and Sheridan talked about and lead us off into the next session. So please help me and welcome Steve Cobb and Sheridan Smith from the Mental Health Association.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with you. This is my coworker Sheridan Smith, and we're going to do our presentation together here. But I wanted to thank Beth and Chris and Terry, because we kind of came in here with all kinds of things were a little different than what they were expecting, and they've really stepped up and helped cover my butt so I don't look like a fool. So we are from we're from the Mental Health Association in Chautauqua County, and I still find out that people don't know what the Mental Health Association is, so we're a peer-run organization that works with people in our community who are experiencing substance use disorders or a mental health diagnosis, and we provide the peer component for recovery. So we partner with a lot of the local clinics that are providing the clinical services for people, but then we provide the peer services. And basically, what I think peer services equal is wellness. Peer support services are wellness, and working on those components of wellness that we all know greatly impact and affect people's lives. Everyone at the MHA are peers, so everyone at the MHA has lived recovery experiences, and that's kind of how we approach working with our participants. I was really excited to hear, I actually found out yesterday that you guys were doing the Bridges Out of Poverty training, and it was real exciting to find this out. I took this training probably about 6 years ago, and it was really one of those trainings for me that was transformative. But one of the things I noticed as I went into that there were some basic knowledge components that I didn't have, that I wish I'd known about before I went into this Bridges Out of Poverty training. So when I found this out last night, I actually kind of went home and altered a little bit how our presentations are going to go, because I thought if this was information that I didn't know, maybe a lot of you didn't know. And I think presenting this that we're going to present today will help prepare you for this Bridges Out of Poverty, and then we'll kind of go into some of the topics that we're going to talk about with employment and substance use disorder and a mental health diagnosis. So one of the first things, well, there are two things I'm going to talk about today. The first one is the social determinants of wellness, and basically the whole concept behind this is that wellness is, or social determinants of health, excuse me. The things that contribute to someone's health is not just the quality of their doctor or the quality of their medical care. That can make a huge impact, but all these other things in society contribute to someone's health. And it can, if you study this, there's all kinds of information on this on the internet, and I could go on for a day on this. I'm not going to go on for a day on this, but this is a little video that gives a really good introduction on social determinants of health and how they impact people, and I invite you to watch this.
Hi, and welcome to this video on the social determinants of health. This is a very important concept to understand because its impact on the health of individuals and populations. We'll be taking a look at what it is, how it impacts health, and a useful framework to understand it. Take a look around you, your family, friends, and other people around you. What's clear is that health is quite variable, not just between individuals, but also across different population groups. Let's take an example. In 2015, the life expectancy of a child born in Sierra Leone was 50 years, whereas in Australia it was 83 years, a difference of 33 years. But there are differences even within countries. For example, in Australia, the life expectancy of Indigenous people is about 10 years lower than that of non-Indigenous people. Within a population, health is also influenced by social status. People with higher income, a higher level of education, and a better occupation have better health and a greater life expectancy. Health status can change as well. For example, studies of migrants have shown that the type of diseases, health behaviors, and risk factors are different in migrants compared to those in their country of origin. So why is there so much variability? To answer that question, we must understand the factors that can influence health. Let's have a look. A person's health is influenced by a range of factors called determinants of health. These include who they are, individual factors such as age, sex, and genetic makeup, and also what they do. This includes their health behaviors such as smoking, physical activity, alcohol use, and diet. Health is also largely influenced by the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age. These include their social and community networks, the socioeconomic, cultural, and environmental conditions that people live in, and also health systems. These are collectively called the social determinants of health. The social determinants of health are ultimately shaped by the distribution of money, power, and resources at an international, national, and local level. They have a marked influence on health inequities, which is the unfair and avoidable health differences between different groups of people within countries or between countries. Now, there are many different social determinants of health, working across many levels and with complex interactions between them. So, to understand and explain how these determinants influence and interact with each other to affect health and well-being, several models or frameworks have been proposed. There are many different frameworks that do this, but let's have a look at one useful framework developed by the World Health Organization. According to this framework, there are two broad types of health determinants that influence health and can lead to health inequities. These are structural determinants and intermediary determinants. Structural determinants refer to the socioeconomic and political context in which a person is born into and lives in. These include governance, how society organizes itself to make and implement decisions, economic, social, and public policies, and also the social and cultural values that communities place on health. These factors can determine and lead to the unequal distribution of material and monetary resources, which shapes a person's socioeconomic position. The socioeconomic position describes a person's place in society, which can affect their exposure, vulnerability, and outcomes to conditions that have an impact on their health. The socioeconomic position is determined by a number of factors, such as education, occupation, income, gender, race or ethnicity, and social class. The socioeconomic position, in turn, affects the intermediary determinants of health. These include material circumstances, like the quality of housing, the financial needs to buy healthy food, clothing, or other requirements for healthy living, and also the work environment. Psychosocial circumstances, like stressful living circumstances, relationships, and social support. Behavioral and biological circumstances. In addition to these, health systems have an impact on the type and quality of health care available to people. It also determines how easy it is for people to access health services and receive the health care they need. Social cohesion and social capital are factors that bridge the structural and intermediary determinants. They describe the willingness of people living in a community to make sacrifices and to cooperate with each other for a wider benefit. Intermediary determinants influence health and health inequities. It's also important to know that the links between these different factors are not always linear, but are complex and can go in both directions. For example, poor income and education can impact health, and also poor health can limit opportunities for people to participate in the workforce or receive education. Also, if population is affected by a lot of disease, it can have a broader impact on the socioeconomic and political context. So how can we change or influence these determinants? Addressing the social determinants of health is not an easy task. It involves identifying the structural and intermediate determinants of health and taking appropriate actions to improve them. To do this requires actions across all sectors of society and at all levels, including local, national, and international. The actions will depend on the existing socioeconomic and political context, resources that are available, and commitment for action. And that's a quick introduction to the social determinants of health. We've had a look at what it is, how it impacts health, and a useful framework to understand it.
So as you can see, it gets pretty heavy, and it leaves you kind of wondering, you know, what can I do about this? And I think the thing that we need to remember most is the things that we can do are the things that we continue to do on a day-to-day basis with the people who we work with, or the employees that we work with. They recently, I had an example that I wanted to share with you at the Women's and Children's Hospital in Cincinnati recently. They had noticed a big problem with children coming in with asthma. And the asthma was flaring up at times that wasn't necessarily traditional for these students, or for the patients. And you all know that if you go in and you see a doctor for asthma, all they're going to focus on probably are the medical components of what the doctor is treating, and maybe talk about some of the social factors that could determine and lead to these flare-ups of asthma. So one of the things that had happened, though, was there were a bunch of medical students at the hospital during that summer, and the medical students began to notice a pattern as to where the patients were coming from and the side of town that they were coming from, and they approached the medical staff and asked if they could dig a little deeper into this. So they did. The medical students got together with the family members of the children who were having these asthma flare-ups and began investigating almost like a private detective. Started looking at where they were living, started looking at pets they had, started looking at all those things that might contribute to asthma. And when they were asking their questions, one of the things that they found out was that all of these patients who were coming in who were experiencing this asthma had the same landlord. And they took that information and then they went and looked at the buildings that the landlord had. So the landlord and his company was in bankruptcy. And the landlord was not able to keep any of the apartments that these people were living in up to code. So the landlord had instituted a rule that there could be no air conditioning in the summer because the wiring and the electrical systems of his buildings would not support them running air conditioning in the summer. So as the students began to look at this, they really began to realize that the problem, while it was manifesting itself in a health problem, the problem was actually having something to do with the landlord. And they also went and looked at the landlord and noticed that there were numerous code violations that landlord had on the apartments where all those folks were living. So the medical students were able to organize the community to go forward, and they appealed to the city. The city began to enforce the codes so that those upgrades were made in that building. And the medical students were actually able to organize a tenants group for these buildings, and the tenants group actually got to the point where they were able to buy the apartment buildings and own them cooperatively, thus addressing some of these disparities. Now, that's just, and it's kind of amazing when you look at this, when we think of clinical care is actually 20% of what affects people and their health. So when you look at the social factors, that's about 40%, the physical environment is 10%, and the health behaviors like tobacco use and diet and exercise and alcohol and drug use, that's about 30%. So one of the, and that's just a little 101 on that topic. So the other area that I wanted to address are ACEs. Have any of you heard of ACEs? You know what ACEs are? Yeah? Okay. ACEs, adverse, I had a handout for you guys there, which was passed out.
Extras are right here if somebody didn't get it.
And ACEs stand for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And ACEs are actually, it's actually a test or an evaluation tool that you can use. And when I had gone for the Bridges Out of Poverty training, I had no idea what ACEs were, and people were talking about ACEs, and I was stumped and puzzled. So I've actually included the ACE test right here. So I'm going to ask each of you to take a couple minutes to just go through that and take and evaluate yourself. If you look at those and look at those questions that we use to evaluate someone's ACE score, and then compare those to some of the things that happen in our community. When I was first able to look at that and compare some of the things that goes on in our community, some of the things that employees that I supervise in my position have experienced, and patients and participants who work with us have experienced, it gave me a new insight as to what they might be experiencing and how those things can affect their life. And it's profound. It's really profound how it affects their lives. If you look at some of the bar graphs on the pages that come with that, I think the first one in your packet there talks about childhood experiences versus adult alcoholism and how the instances of adult alcoholism rise with the number of adverse childhood experiences that someone has. You can also, the following one, look at how it impacts chronic depression. At the following one, it talks there about antidepressant prescriptions and how, if you look at that chart, if somebody has just one ACE score, their chance of being prescribed an antidepressant goes up 20%. I'm not going to go over every one of those, but I just wanted to have an opportunity to look at the impact of some of those scores. So one of the things as a supervisor that impacted me recently was I've been supervising employees at work for probably about 3 years, and shortly after I started 3 years ago supervising, we had an issue where an employee was terminated, and about 2.5 years later, about 6 months ago, I ran into this employee in the street, and we were talking, and we had a wonderful conversation, and this employee thanked me for everything that she had learned while she was working at the MHA, and she identified to me one of her ACEs, unbeknownst to her. I don't think she realized what she was doing, but she was talking about, she was apologizing for being a difficult employee to me. And she said to me that growing up, she had awful relationships with men, and she was sexually abused by men. And so that me being her supervisor, that impacted me being a male, that impacted the way she would communicate with me and the way she would interact with me. You know, and I kind of thought back to that 3 years ago, and I was like, yes, absolutely. Because as she was very hesitant to come to me and ask for help. She would go to one of my female co-workers and ask for help, and there was always a little bit of a friction between us. And as peers at the MHA and working with peers, we base a lot of our relationships and the work we do with people on sharing an appropriate amount of our story, of our recovery story and what we've been through. And as peers, that's part of what we do. That's not part of what all you do here. But so we have the benefit sometimes of knowing someone's personal story. But in society and in a general sense, we don't always have the benefit of knowing someone's personal story. But I think it's important to remember that with everyone's actions, there's probably some story that has helped generate that action, that reaction, that defense mechanism. And if we can keep that in our mind often when we're dealing with people, I think that becomes a very powerful tool to support people in employment. So I think at this point, I'm going to let Sheridan talk for a few minutes.
So I'm going to talk about the practical expressions of that. So when someone has had an adverse childhood experience or someone has had a lot of trauma in their life, they respond differently to different circumstances. So one thing that I hear a lot of people say is a little expense now will save you a lot of expense later. Someone who has had a lot of trauma or who's had a home that's unsafe doesn't have any faith in later. If they are looking for something that makes things better right now, even if it's pushing the can down the road, even if it's going to cost them more later, at least it makes it better right now, because what else is going to go wrong anyway? There's nothing that's guaranteeing that it's going to get better down the road. And when you've had an experience that teaches you that systems are unreliable, that people are unreliable, that the future is unreliable, you don't behave in the same way that you do if you've had security. So, one of the things that we do is routine maintenance on our cars. We get oil changes, we do things like get tires for snow before the snow falls, or at least some of us. I don't. I always wait until just after, when my car has slid into something. But a lot of people don't necessarily do that because their car is running. At least it's going somewhere right now, so why would I get an oil change? That's just an expense that I don't need. It's that kind of mindset. So when you're dealing with somebody, if you are looking for them to plan more for the future, if you are looking for them to start creating these modes of behavior that are going to pay off later rather than right now. So start taking care of things before they become a problem. Start looking for ways to help out other employees. You're going to need to understand that they need a lot of reinforcement, or they need a lot of or reason to believe that it's going to be a good thing, that it's going to work for the better. And that's environmental. Someone who has had these experiences is going to need to be proven, or going to need to have proven to them again and again that you are trustworthy, again and again that you are safe, again and again that this is not a dangerous situation. And it's going to be needed, you need to prove it in so many different ways. That's what these experiences do. That's what trauma does to somebody. And keeping that in mind can help you understand why someone is not doing a thing that is saving them something later, which is very important. Also, these adverse childhood experiences can manifest in trauma triggers. Another thing that a lot of employers say is, whatever is going on in your life, leave it at home. That doesn't always happen. And it's because sometimes that can't happen. So somebody has an adverse experience, somebody has some trauma in their life, and there is a very specific trigger to it. Something happens that leans back to this time when they were abused, or this time when something very big and very tragic happened in their lives. The response is physiological as much as psychological. The response is immediate. And the response is, at the time it happens, nearly uncontrollable. If anyone has ever had a panic attack, has anyone in the room had a panic attack? If someone tells you in the middle of a panic attack to calm down, does that work really effectively? No. That's not how panic attacks work. That's not how this physical response works. Something will happen. It could be known to the person, it could be unknown to the person, and all they know is that there's danger. All they know is that something is about to go wrong. That is their world at the moment. And understanding that, you can understand why emotions sometimes spill over. When there's danger, there's the fight or flight. So someone will either leave and not come back, someone will leave for a break when they're not supposed to have a break, or someone will lash out. Those are not ideal, but it happens. It happens in your personal life and it happens in your work life. These are the kind of things that I have to, or that I talk about and that I address when I'm working with people who are re-entering the workforce after long periods of life setbacks due to mental illness or due to substance use. One of the things I focus on most is just following through. Being a person who says something and does it. Because I choose this carefully. Because I understand that everything that I say, everything that I do is an entire way that that person is existing with me. It's not the way the person views me, it's not the way the person talks about me or talks to me, it's the way they feel in this situation. So I understand that everything that I do in every circumstance that I have is a way to prove to that person that there is safety, there is consistency, and there is a future. One of the roles of a peer is cheerleader. The other thing that I do is I become that little bug in their ear that says it'll get better. I become that little bug in the ear that says that you are capable, that you are worthy of trust, that you are worthy of success, that you can accomplish things if you want. It's hard to hear that when your life has proven different. But if you say it enough, if you believe it enough, if you find ways for them to succeed, or if you find ways for them to learn practically that they are going to be valued, that they are going to have consistency, that they are someone that you take, or someone whose trust you take seriously, it's going to impact them differently. It's not always about the job. It's not always about the exact task that they're doing. Sometimes it's about allowing them to talk to you without betraying their confidence. Sometimes it's about allowing them to talk to you about their frustrations without trying to fix it or trying to say, well, you're doing this wrong. They say that they're frustrated because they're not keeping up, and you go, okay, I understand, that sucks. That sucks. Well, just do the best you can. As opposed to, well, you know what you should do? Here's how you can fix it, because it seems like that can be a very good way to help, but it can also be a way, as long as they're succeeding, it can be a way to tell them that there's still something wrong, that there's still something wrong with them. So approaching things in different ways, approaching people with this in mind, understanding adverse childhood experiences and how it can actually lead to poor outcomes in health, understanding their socioeconomic status and how it can lead to poor outcomes in health, but also understanding trauma, understanding difficulties emotionally, and why someone would choose the immediate payoff over the long-term payoff, or why someone would not be able to keep some emotions out of work is important. Those are the practical ways to understand it. And it's just compassion, honestly. Understanding that everyone's different, everyone has a story, everyone has a history that sometimes goes back generations, and allowing them to be moved by it, allowing them to be put in context because of it, but not holding them to that history, not holding them to their circumstances, not making sure that they stay there, but making sure that they're given every opportunity to trust and to grow and to take risks that they normally wouldn't take. So I think that's about good. I'll open it to questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Steve or Sheridan before we move on to the next little video part? I know a lot of the people that they support at MHA are our staff. They're people that we work with every day. They're people that we support in our programs, and they're our employees that work here. So when we had our group that was putting these 4 sessions together, they were first on our list of speakers to get, because we know the impact that they have with people. And I'm sure as they were talking and telling stories, you were probably thinking of some employees that you have that have experienced trauma that you may know of, or that you may not know of, but that might put some, red flags up or some light bulbs that say, oh, that's might be why somebody did something that they did. So thank you guys very much for your time. We very much appreciate that. One of the things that, as part of the SAFER program, what we're doing is we're doing this and going out to other businesses and helping them with their retention, and we're providing supports to employees that work at other businesses. So the types of things that Steve and Sheridan talked about, we're working with people that work, they could work in a factory, they could work in a nursing home, and we're trying to help those businesses work with their employees and meeting them where they're at. So some of those businesses will be coming to that Bridges Out of Poverty training that we're having too, because it's important for all of the people that we're working with, for them to hear this as well. One of the things I forgot to mention at the beginning, these sessions are all being recorded by Chris Anderson, and they're going to be uploaded to Relias for those people that were unable to attend, because it's very important that these 4 sessions are seen before that Bridges Out of Poverty training. So those will be uploaded to Relias for everybody to see. And we're going to close with a video that Beth is going to show, and then she'll kind of talk about how that's tying in. But this is a video that, do you want to kind of set the stage for it, or do you want to?
No, I think it's self-explanatory, and we'll just have a few comments at the end.
Okay.
Carrie, I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
I think it's more for you than that. And this whole thing we're going to be attending, at some point, does it address, when you recognize those issues with an employee, okay, at what point, taking care of the employee and going against the employer's expectations, does this get to that? And
Well, the process that we're getting to is going to get to that because of staff assistance. So staff assistance is going to be growing, and it's going to be more involved. So when you get to a point where you recognize that an employee is struggling and that they need extra support beyond what you as a supervisor can do, that's when you would connect them with staff assistance, and staff assistance can get more involved. But one of the things that we're going to be talking about in one of our later sessions are community resources, and that you guys all kind of need to understand what's there for staff, because I'm sure a lot of you didn't know that a lot of people could go to MHA for some peer supports or do other things. And so that you may not need to involve staff assistance. You might say, hey, have you ever heard of MHA? Do you know you could just go down there and have a cup of coffee and talk to some peers? And so we're going to be learning about some other community resources that are available for your employees in addition to EAP. This is not to take away EAP or anything that's provided there, but they may not know that they can go to Community Helping Hands to get clothes for their kids, or that they can go get furniture someplace. So that's going to be part of it too, but staff assistants will be the ones that will be kind of taking the lead as far as if you have an employee that rises to a level where they need more than what their supervisor can give. Okay? Any other questions? I didn't think about questions for me, I thought about questions for Steve and Sheridan. Okay.
Hey, it's me, Destin. Welcome back to Smarter Every Day. You've heard people say it's just like riding a bike, meaning it's really easy and you can't forget how to do it, right? But I did something. I did something that damaged my mind. It happened on the streets of Amsterdam, and I got really scared, honestly. I can't ride a bike like you can anymore. Before I show you the video of what happened, I need to tell you the backstory. Like many 6-year-olds with a MacGyver mullet, I learned how to ride a bike when I was really young. I had learned a life skill and I was really proud of it. Everything changed though when my friend Barney called me 25 years later. Where I work, the welders are geniuses and they like to play jokes on the engineers. He had a challenge for me. He had built a special bicycle and he wanted me to try to ride it. He had only changed one thing. When you turn the handlebar to the left, the wheel goes to the right. When you turn it to the right, the wheel goes to the left. I thought this would be easy, so I hopped on the bike ready to demonstrate how quickly I could conquer this.
And here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Destin Sandlin. First attempt riding the bicycle.
All right. So the faster I go, the better. Yeah.
I couldn't do it. You can see that I'm laughing, but I'm actually really frustrated. In this moment, I had a really deep revelation. My thinking was in a rut. This bike revealed a very deep truth to me. I had the knowledge of how to operate the bike, but I did not have the understanding. Therefore, knowledge is not understanding. Look, I know what you're probably thinking. Destin's probably just an uncoordinated engineer and can't do it. But that's not the case at all. The algorithm that's associated with riding a bike in your brain is just that complicated. Think about it. Downwards force on the pedals, leaning your whole body, pulling and pushing the handlebars, gyroscopic precession in the wheels, every single force is part of this algorithm. And if you change any one part, it affects the entire control system. I do not make definitive statements that often, but I'm telling you right now, you cannot ride this bicycle. You might think you can, but you can't. I know this because I'm often asked to speak at universities and conferences, and I take the bike with me. It's always the same. People think they're going to try some trick or they're just going to power through it. It doesn't work. Your brain cannot handle this. For instance, this guy, I offered him $200 just to ride this bike 10 feet across the stage. Everybody thought he could do it.
No, you didn't understand. You didn't understand. So, this way. Okay. All right, just a second. All right, so, whenever you're ready. Yeah. Wait. No, you have to keep your feet on. All right, here we go. Wait. Like, you gotta start rolling at least. And go. Oh, no! All right, back up. Okay, wait. Keep your feet on the pedal. Go. Go right on. Just keep your feet on the pedals. Handles on. Yeah, come on. All right, one more time. Okay.
Once you have a rigid way of thinking in your head, sometimes you cannot change that, even if you want to. So here's what I did. It was a personal challenge. I stayed out here in this driveway and I practiced about 5 minutes every day. My neighbors made fun of me. I had many wrecks, but after 8 months, this happened. One day I couldn't ride the bike and the next day I could. It was like I could feel some kind of pathway in my brain that was now unlocked. It was really weird though. It's like there's this trail in my brain, but if I wasn't paying close enough attention to it, my brain would easily lose that neural path and jump back onto the old road it was more familiar with. Any small distractions at all, like a cell phone ringing in my pocket, would instantly throw my brain back to the old control algorithm and I would wreck. But at least I could ride it. My son is the closest person to me genetically, and he's been riding a normal bike for 3 years. That's over half his life. I wanted to know how long it would take him to learn how to ride a backwards bike, so I told him if he learned how to ride a backwards bike, he could go with me to Australia and meet a real astronaut. Are you going to give up? No. Go ahead. This is how it starts. Look at this. This is such a big deal. Get up, you got it. Did you see his brain get it? So in how many weeks have we been doing this? 2 weeks? In 2 weeks, he did something that took me 8 months to do, which demonstrates that a child has more neuroplasticity, am I even saying that right, than an adult. It's clear from this experiment that children have a much more plastic brain than adults. That's why the best time to learn a language is when you're a young child. All right, today's bike log. I can ride smooth, I can ride fast. I'm thinking the experiment is over. Okay, now I'm in Amsterdam, a city that has more bicycles than people. The question is, can I ride a normal bike now? I mean, I've spent all this time unlearning how to ride a bike. If I go back and try to ride a normal one, will my brain mess up? So I've tweeted a Smarter Everyday meetup, if you will, and I'm gonna see if somebody brings a bicycle and I'm gonna try to ride a normal bike. It's backwards, it's backwards. This was one of the most frustrating moments of my life. I had ridden a normal bike since I was 6, but in this moment I couldn't do it anymore. I had set out to prove that I could free my brain from a cognitive bias, but at this point I'm pretty sure that all I proved is that I could only redesignate that bias. So what you're not seeing is just a group of people here looking at me, looking at the strange American that can't ride a bike because they think I'm dumb. But I'm actually 2 levels deep into this because I've learned and unlearned. All right. After 20 minutes of making a fool out of myself, suddenly my brain clicked back into the old algorithm. I can't explain it, but it happened in a very specific moment. Got it. I'm back. Oh, it clicked. Hold on, it clicked. I got it. Okay, there it is. There's the moment. Okay, I can ride a bike. I tried to explain this to the people around me, and they just didn't get it. They thought I was faking the previous 20 minutes, and I couldn't get anybody to believe me. That looked like I faked that, didn't it? Yeah. Just a fake. You think I'm faking. You don't believe me.
so weird to like, la, la, and it's
You think I'm lying, don't
Yeah, I
you? I'm not lying. I felt like the only person on the planet who had ever unlearned how to ride a bike, and I couldn't articulate it to anyone because everybody just knew that you can't forget how to ride a bike. So I learned 3 things from this experiment. I learned that welders are often smarter than engineers. I learned that knowledge does not equal understanding. And I learned that truth is truth, no matter what I think about it. So be very careful how you interpret things because you're looking at the world with a bias, whether you think you are or not. I'm Destin. You're getting smarter every day.
But I like this video because it brings up 2 things to me. If we're going to make a change in how we think, we have to be intentional on how we're going to do it, and we have to keep at it. It's not just having that thought to make the change. You have to do things to make yourself think differently. Okay, the other thing it brings up to me is it helps me recognize biases that I might have that are just in my head, that I don't realize the biases I have until maybe I say something or see something and I self-reflect and like, why did I say that? What was I thinking when I said that? That kind of reflects the biases that I have. So it also makes me, when I'm thinking about it, as I supervise people and employees, it really makes me step back and think about, do I have biases because they're coming in late all the time and I'm already kind of emotional about it, I'm angry about that. And maybe I need to step back from that a little bit and be more intentional and take the time to have that conversation. Because maybe there's something going on in that person's life and they're making very difficult decisions. And if I was under those same circumstances, I might make those same decisions. But maybe I need some help as an employee and I don't know where to go. I don't want to come to my supervisors maybe because I don't want you to judge me, even though I'm getting in trouble because I'm coming in late or whatever the issue is. So that video just kind of brings to light to me some of those things that if we want change, and we want employees to stay here, and we want employees to be successful, we have to be very intentional in what we're doing. And we need to work with them and create safe environments so that people can share that stuff with us so that we can develop our workforce and retain it. So,
If you want to look that up on YouTube, it's called Riding a Bike Backward, or Riding a Backward Bike, I think is what it is. So, Riding a Backward Bike. Sorry, I'm out of the camera lens. So thank you guys so much for coming. I know this particular session was short notice. The other 3 sessions that are coming up should be in your calendars on Outlook. The next one is going to be Chautauqua Tapestry, talking about what is and what is not cultural competency. The one after that is going to be Joe Alexis Martyr from Community Helping Hands, thank you, talking about community resources. And the last one is going to be our very own Cody Ann Chambers, talking about triggers and tips and triggers that trigger people, that why they may just leave or why they do some of the things that they do and how we can help retain them. So thank you all very much for your time. We appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.